Paleontology has got to be one of the toughest sciences out there. Imagine trying to reconstruct long-extinct animals, some of which died out hundreds of millions of years ago, using nothing more than a pile of bones. Sometimes you're lucky and get a nearly complete skeleton. Other times, you've got just a fragment. So, yeah, it's no surprise that paleontologists have made quite a few mistakes along the way. Most of the time, these errors are pretty harmless. Maybe someone guessed a dinosaur was a little taller or heavier than it actually was. But every once in a while, a mistake comes along that's big, like really big. The kind of error that totally changes how we view a creature. And the 7 animals we're going to look at today, each one of them was misunderstood so badly at one point that it literally rewrote our understanding of the prehistoric world. Let's kick things off with Megalosaurus, which actually holds the honor of being the very first dinosaur ever described. It's kind of understandable that the early interpretation was off, given that the whole concept of dinosaurs didn't even exist when it was discovered. So picture this. It's 1824. A British paleontologist named William Buckland is studying a few fossilized bones, a femur, some vertebrae, and part of a lower jaw. That's all he had to go on. Dinosaurs hadn't even been named yet, so Buckland concluded that he was looking at a massive meat-eating lizard. He imagined it walking on 4 legs, kind of like a supersized Komodo dragon. Oh, and he also thought it was amphibious. Maybe it lived in rivers like a crocodile. Based on the bones, Buckland guessed that this creature, Megalosaurus, would have been around 40 feet long if you added the flesh back on. But then, a competing paleontologist found an even bigger bone and decided, nope, it's got to be bigger than that, and bumped the estimate up to 70 feet. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Back then, science and religion were closely intertwined, and a lot of scientists were trying to make their discoveries fit within Christian beliefs. Buckland was one of them. The idea that Megalosaurus was a meat-eater posed a problem. Christian doctrine taught that death and suffering came into the world only after Adam and Eve's original sin. So how could this prehistoric predator exist before humanity? Well, Buckland had a creative solution. He claimed Megalosaurus wasn't a predator in the traditional sense. Instead, he suggested it was more of a mercy killer, taking out the sick and elderly animals to reduce suffering. Seriously, that was the theory. Of course, as more fossils were discovered, especially more complete theropods, it became clear that Buckland was way off. Megalosaurus didn't walk on 4 legs. It was a biped. And it definitely wasn't amphibious. It lived fully on land. As for the size, modern estimates put it at about 30 feet long, weighing just over a ton. Still a respectable apex predator for Jurassic Britain, but not quite the monster Buckland imagined. Now, while Megalosaurus was one of the earliest misinterpretations, mistakes in paleontology haven't gone away, not even in modern times. And it's not just dinosaurs that get misidentified. Even creatures that are still around today, like spiders, have had their prehistoric ancestors misunderstood. Case in point, back in the 1980s, an Argentinian scientist was digging around in the Carboniferous-aged Bajo de Vélez Formation in Argentina and came across a very strange fossil. It had a large body, 3 distinct appendages, and what looked like a turret-like tail. This bizarre combination of features made it hard to categorize. But looking at the general shape, the scientist concluded that he'd found the fossil of a giant ancient spider. And not just any spider, this thing was huge. It measured 13.3 inches, or about 34 centimeters in length. That's bigger than the Goliath bird-eater, which was, until then, the largest known spider. This discovery was a big deal. It shook up what we thought we knew about the limits of spider size. Naturally, the new fossil got an epic name, Megarachne, meaning giant spider. It caught the public's imagination right away. Museums displayed it, documentaries featured it, toy companies even made figures of it. But not everyone was convinced. Some scientists noticed some odd features that didn't quite match what we know about spiders. For example, Megarachne had a strange segmentation between the front and back of its body, and its chelicerae, those fang-like mouthparts, had a shape that no modern or extinct spider had. Still, supporters of the giant spider theory brushed these off as unique adaptations or evidence of a new, long-lost order of spiders. Here's the kicker. The original fossil had been stored in a vault for years, and only plaster casts were available for study. So for a long time, it was tough to analyze the actual specimen. But then in 2005, a second, much more complete fossil was found. It looked a lot like Megarachne, and scientists were hopeful this would finally confirm once and for all what to this day you can still find Megarachne being misrepresented as a spider in some places, just because, well, they already paid for the model. And hey, sea scorpions are cool, but they're just not quite as nightmare-inducing as a house-sized spider. Today, scientists think Megarachne was more of a bottom dweller, sifting through muddy freshwater environments with its rake-like limbs, hunting for small invertebrates. So instead of lurking in the forest, ready to pounce on prey, it was just a really big bug trawling the shallows. And while that case of mistaken identity is pretty wild, it's not the most dramatic example on this list. For that, we've got to go back to dinosaurs. Specifically to a dinosaur that's become incredibly famous in recent years, Therizinosaurus. Thanks to its cameo in Jurassic World, most people recognize this one instantly, mostly because of those freakishly long claws. But here's the thing, when it was first discovered, no one even thought it was a dinosaur. In fact, the first scientist who looked at the fossils thought it was a turtle. Yep, a turtle. Want to find out how that happened? When it was discovered, scientists were absolutely baffled. See, the thing about the Cambrian period is that it gave us some of the weirdest creatures to have ever existed, and Anomalocaris is no exception. But instead of being identified as one strange animal, its body parts were so weird and scattered that they were actually classified as three completely different species. Let me explain. The first fossil they found looked kind of like a shrimp's tail, and early paleontologists figured, okay, it's a shrimp. So it got filed away in the books as an ancient crustacean. Later, they found another fossil. This one looked like a circular, tooth-lined mouth. Scientists thought it was a jellyfish because of its round shape and soft body. Naturally, they gave it a different name. Then came another piece, long, spine-covered appendages. These were thought to belong to some weird sea worm, or maybe even some unknown arthropod. For years, all of these body parts were sitting in different museum drawers, each with its own label, nobody realizing they were actually from the same animal. That was until more complete specimens were finally discovered in the Burgess Shale of Canada, which revealed the truth. The shrimp tail, the jellyfish mouth, and the strange spiny arms all belonged to a single creature, Anomalocaris, which literally means abnormal shrimp. And when paleontologists pieced everything together, they were stunned. This thing was a beast for its time, almost a meter long, swimming gracefully through ancient oceans with a flexible, segmented body, using its flaps to glide like a modern cuttlefish. Its spiny front limbs were used to grab prey, and its round, toothy mouth would crush them. Basically, Anomalocaris was the T-Rex of the Cambrian seas. Looking back, the confusion makes sense. Fossilization is rare, and finding a full, intact specimen is even rarer, especially for soft-bodied creatures. But it's still wild to think how many years it took before people realized this prehistoric horror was not three animals, but one. Speaking of animals being misunderstood because of how they were preserved, let's talk about a creature that became one of the most famous fossil fails of all time, Archaeoraptor. If you were following science news back in the late 90s, this one might ring a bell. So, here's what happened. In 1999, National Geographic made a huge announcement. They had found what looked like the missing link between birds and dinosaurs, a small, feathered dinosaur with a long bony tail, claws, and the distinct shape of a bird. They called it Archaeoraptor, and it was hailed as one of the most important discoveries in the field of evolution. For a moment, it really did seem like we'd found the perfect example of a transitional fossil. But then, things started to fall apart, quite literally. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into paleontology's biggest missteps, hit that like button, subscribe for more weird science content, and let me know in the comments what's your favorite fossil fail. Until next time, stay curious.